Good evening, everyone. I'm here to share a lesson plan on a chemistry lesson for Secondary 3 Express GC O level. The duration of this lesson is around 50 minutes. The topic for this lesson is reactivity of metals. So in this learning package, I will share how we can use ICT such as Google Docs and an online animation app to facilitate in the understanding on these learning outcomes as listed. So before this lesson, students are expected to have prior knowledge on describe the physical properties of metals, define redox reactions in terms of oxygen, hydrogen, electrons, and oxidation number. So these are the prior knowledge that students have learned before this lesson. For the learning outcomes, students are expected to understand and know how to place in order of reactivity these metals: calcium, copper. Hydrogen is not a metal, but it is used as a reference. Iron, lead, magnesium, potassium, sodium, silver, and zinc by reference to reactions with water and steam, as well as acid, decomposition of metal carbonates, and reduction of oxides with carbon. They are expected to be able to deduce the order of reactivity from a given set of experimental results, deduce the action of heat on the carbonates of the listed metals, and relate thermal stability to the reactivity series of metals. And lastly, they will be able to deduce with explanations the order of reactivity from displacements reactions. So in this lesson, the assessment will be as follows. We will assess their ability to deduce the order of reactivity of metals based on given reactions and explain the order of reactivity of metals based on given set of experimental results. So the main objective is to rank the order of reactivity of metals based on given experimental results. The resources include instructional worksheet and the app as mentioned. So the approach for this lesson will be students will complete the given guided exercise. So it will be a guided inquiry exercise to help them deduce the reactivity of metals based on the given set of experimental results and justify their choice. So in this lesson, I will divide into parts. So for the introduction, the teacher will take this time to recap some chemical properties of metals by asking questions like, okay, what are the reactions of metals you are familiar with? And what metals can react with? So students are expected to relate to reaction of metals with acid. Some might answer reactions of metal with water or steam if they have read ahead. And then the teacher will then proceed to inform the students the objective of today's lesson. So the questions were asked to gather some understanding from students. So the teacher will be able to understand what are the learning gaps or what the students know or not know, so that the teacher can address any misconception if there's any before proceeding to start the lesson. So students will be given the learning outcomes, okay? And then the teacher will divide the class into pairs, okay? And students will work in pair to complete the activity. So the teacher will distribute instruction worksheet, set expectation for the class. So they are supposed to cooperate in pair, discuss before presenting their answers. They are given at least 2 minutes to read the question because there are quite a number of data to read, and allow them to clarify any doubts and questions before starting the activity. So the rationale for this session was to refresh and recap with pupils on the previous lesson as well as to provide students with an overview of the lesson and lead them to the objective of this lesson, as well as to set the right expectations and provide the time frame for pupils to work within. Now, before I show you the worksheet, which is below, I will share with you what will be completed within the 40 minutes, meaning the main part of this lesson. So as mentioned, this will be a pair work activity where students are required to rank the reactivity of metals from the most to the least reactive based on given experimental data. So students are required to explain their deductions. And this is the part where ICT can be integrated to facilitate in the lesson execution. So students will discuss within their pair to complete the activity on Google Docs. So instead of writing on the piece of worksheet, they can write their answer on the Google Docs so that it can be shared within the class for learning. And then students will then present their answers on Google Docs and present their explanations. All right. Now, so the teacher in this work will act as a facilitator and went a while to help those in need. So the resources include instructional worksheet, Google Doc, and the online app, which will be used later. So students will use this time to complete the activity by working in pairs to deduce the order of reactivity and explain their answer based on their prior knowledge. Okay, so they will then complete another activity on the displacement reactions, which I show you later with the applet. So the students will discuss within the pair to complete the activity on Google Docs before presenting on Google Docs and present their answers and explanations. So this is the activity worksheet. So the tasks are given below. So in task 1, the table shows experimental results of 6 different metals and their compounds, U, V, all the way to Z, containing different chemicals. So based on the experimental results, they are supposed to determine the order of reactivity of the 6 metals. Okay, so experiment 1 and 2 involve the collection of a specific volume of a gas. Experiment 3 involve the time taken for the solution to turn opaque because white precipitate is appearing in the lime water by the production of CO2. And then experiment 4 involve the collection of gas. Okay, although it's not shown clearly, but it will be given in the instruction. So this is the experimental setup, and this is the data. Okay, the experimental data. So these are the 6 metals to be compared with, and then these are the data for the various experiment 1, 2, 3, and 4 respectively. Okay, so they can actually discuss within their pair and based on the experimental results, right, determine the order of reactivity in descending order. So starting from the most reactive to the least reactive and give appropriate reasons. All right. Now, so they are supposed to, they haven't learned this topic yet. So it's based on intuition and logical reasoning. Like for example, they are supposed to know that, okay, if this metal is the most reactive, within the same time of 20 seconds, it's expected to collect the highest volume of gas. For example, based on the first set of data, X actually produced the highest volume. So it's expected that X will have the highest volume of gas, hence it should be the most reactive, followed by V, and then U, and then Y. As for W and Z, there's no oxidation, meaning they are unreactive metals. So if you have to go to the second set of data to rank W and Z, then also refer to the second set of data to confirm the relative position of the metal reactivity as stated in the first experiment. So the first and second set of data should be aligned. Okay, there shouldn't be misalignment. So if X has the highest volume, then in experiment 2, it should also be the same. Okay, so now it's obvious that W has some gas collected, so it should be the more reactive metal than Z. Then as for the third experiment where it's about the decomposition of the carbonates, so the more reactive the metal, students are supposed to infer that, oh, if the metal is more reactive, then the carbonate should be more thermally stable. So it's more difficult to decompose upon heating. So the time taken will be longer for the more reactive one. So you can see that it's not even observed for X, but then for the least reactive metal, Z, you will take the shortest time for the solution to turn opaque. Then the same set of result is observed for experiment 4. So they are supposed to use the available data to justify their answer as best as they could. And then there will be some questions to further understand the experiment. For example, why the same number of moles of each metal must be kept constant, okay? And why this method of collection of gas is suitable, and establish a relationship between reactivity of metals and thermal stability of the compound, and recap on formation of metal ion from atom, because this has to do with reactivity. And then we talk about comparing the metal of different atomic radius, which one is more reactive based on their atomic radius. Then for the second activity, which I mentioned just now, is an activity that have to use an online app. Okay, so this online app is something that can be done at home. So if there's not enough time, they can actually complete as a homework and teacher can discuss that in the next lesson. But if there's enough time, then the teacher can proceed, or teacher can choose to let students go back home and finish the questions and discuss in the next lesson. Then they can proceed to do this first within their pair, the activity. So this is quite cool. You have 4 different metals and the aqueous salt solutions of the metal. So they can drop the metal piece into the solution and see the color. So in the next page, which shows the table of results, students can write down the observation. For example, they can say colorless solution turn blue, something like that, or blue solution turn colorless, something along that line. And they will also can see there's a metal deposit, okay, because of displacement reaction. So they will write down their observation here based on the observations in the app as they insert the metal into the various salt solution. And then they will actually answer the questions that follow with some equations, questions, and recap on redox reaction and the expected observations when iron added to copper 2 sulfate, and another activity for them to try with other examples. So quite cool. Okay, now, and it's quite fun. So the conclusion of this lesson will be, so at the end of this lesson, for the last 5 minutes before lesson end, teachers are to conclude learning points by referring to learning objective as follows. The most reactive metal will take the shortest amount of time for reaction to complete. The most reactive metal forms compound that will take longer time to decompose. And the more reactive metal displays the less reactive metal from the compound. So that's about it. I hope it will be helpful. Thank you.